London. This is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: fighting paused in Gaza for a seventh day as international mediators negotiate the release of more hostages and Palestinian prisoners. Our other headlines: the World Meteorological Organization says 2023 will be the hottest year on record, piling the pressure on leaders at COP28 climate talks. And China mourns a pioneer and architect of Sino-US relations as Henry Kissinger dies at the age of 100, but he leaves behind a controversial legacy. A temporary truce in Gaza has been extended for a seventh day as international mediators try to negotiate the release of more hostages and Palestinians held in Israeli jails. On Wednesday, 12 Israeli and 4 Thai hostages held by the militant group Hamas arrived back in Israel. In exchange, 30 Palestinian women and teenage boys were freed from Israeli detention. Egyptian and Qatari negotiators are pushing for a new 2-day extension to this truce, as well as an increase in deliveries of humanitarian aid to Gaza. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Noor Harazin, who is there for us. Noor, this truce only extended by 24 hours. How are people there receiving that news?
Well, Palestinians here in Gaza are thirsty for a truce, even if it's just for an hour. Even 1 hour will mean something for Palestinians, especially that during the last weeks of the Israeli operation on Gaza, just before the truce, we witnessed intensive Israeli strikes and shelling on Gaza, where hundreds were killed. So yeah, every hour for Palestinians where it is peaceful, there is calm, it means something for the Palestinians. However, because this time the truce extended for only 24 hours, they realized that things are getting harder, the negotiations are more difficult. So actually today we're seeing people going out to the markets, preparing themselves for the worst. Previously people did think that maybe the Israeli operation will continue here in Gaza, but the fact that it is just 24 hours, so yes, they do believe that the operation will continue, that things are getting harder. They are buying as much flour, bread, water as they can, just so they can survive over the next days in case the negotiations failed and we are back to a new round of violence between Hamas and Israel.
Can you brief us on the humanitarian situation in Gaza? Have conditions improved at all since this pause in fighting?
Well, of course, we're talking about hundreds of humanitarian aid trucks that entered the Gaza Strip. However, here on the ground, what we are witnessing on the ground is that the distribution of this aid is very, very, very slow. People here can hardly feel any change on the ground. The reason why is because the amount of aid actually does not meet the needs of the people. It is very little, and also now people need, they have other needs because winter is approaching. They need blankets, they need clothes, they need shoes. So it is not about food and water anymore. Adding to this the fact of the lack of fuel that does not operate the UN facilities and cars to distribute the aid to the UN schools around southern Gaza. Also, there is a very important point about the northern Gaza. Over the past days, only dozens of humanitarian aid trucks entered northern Gaza, and we're talking about northern Gaza. We're talking about hundreds of people that are thirsty, hungry. They reach a point where they are breaking into shops actually to take their needs. So yes, this is the situation. There is humanitarian aid, but it is very little to meet the needs of the people.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Let me take you now to get the view from Israel and talk to our correspondent Sarah Coates. in Tel Aviv. Sarah, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting Israeli officials there. Is this likely to influence truce talks and further hostage releases?
Hi, Jamie. Well, look, you would think so, especially in the very short term. Blinken and the rest of the US administration have become increasingly firm with Israel to try and limit human casualties, civilian casualties inside the Gaza Strip, telling them that they must restrain themselves more than they have been. Blinken's also been highlighting the benefits of these pauses, namely to get these captives out of the Strip and also to get more humanitarian aid into the Strip. Now, we do know that he met with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, also the War Cabinet. A little earlier, he was briefed on Israel's potential ongoing or next stage of the war inside the Gaza Strip and has just met the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Now, Blinken will certainly be wanting to take something home that's positive from this trip, especially amid growing criticism from the international community that Washington is complicit here in Israel's actions. But look, as we've heard time and time again from Israel, it is determined to finish what it started and achieve its goals inside Gaza, which is, of course, defeating Hamas and making sure the atrocities of October 7 never happen again. Jamie.
Away from the diplomatic talks, there's been an attack in Jerusalem this morning. What more can you tell us?
Well, look, Hamas just put out a statement a little earlier on its Telegram channel. It said that it takes responsibility for this attack. It's in response to the occupation's crimes of killing children and women in Gaza. Now, it happened at around 8 o'clock local time this morning. CCTV footage captured two men jumping out of the car. They are reportedly two brothers in their 30s from East Jerusalem. Now, they opened fire on these commuters standing there, killing 3 people, wounding around 15 more before they were gunned down, shot dead by 2 off-duty reserve soldiers and also an armed passer-by. Now, the Shin Bet security agency, it says that these 2 men have both been affiliated with Hamas, and they've both served time in prison for terror-related activities. Now, on the back of this, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, he came out, he wrote on X that his government will continue to distribute weapons to civilians in light of that attack, really echoing what we heard half an hour earlier from the far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Israel. Well, China has released its first position paper on the Gaza conflict after taking over the rotating presidency of the United Nations Security Council for November. Beijing has called on the Council to formulate a roadmap for a two-state solution that it says can achieve a comprehensive, just and lasting settlement to the Israel-Palestine conflict. China also called for a broad-based, authoritative and effective international peace conference as soon as possible. Now, the rest of the day's news, and a man who'll be remembered for his devotion to China-US relations. That was the tribute from China's foreign ministry following the death of the former United States diplomat Henry Kissinger at the age of 100. Kissinger was National Security Advisor and then Secretary of State between 1969 and 1977, and was a pivotal figure in Washington's rapprochement with Beijing 50 years ago. His final visit to China was in July this year, when he met President Xi Jinping, who has sent his condolences to President Biden and the Kissinger family.
China and the United States must inherit and carry forward Dr. Kissinger's strategic vision, political courage and diplomatic wisdom, adhere to the important consensus reached by the Chinese and American presidents at their meeting in San Francisco, adhere to mutual respect, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation, and promote healthy and stable Sino-US relations, sustainable development.
Ukrainian authorities say Russian missiles have struck apartment buildings in the country's east, killing at least 1 person and injuring many more. Villages in the embattled Donetsk region were targeted by the shelling. There are fears more people are buried under rubble. The attacks came as Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky visited troops on the front line. Russia's foreign minister is attending a security summit in North Macedonia despite protests from Baltic countries and Ukraine. Representatives from Ukraine, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania have boycotted this gathering of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe because of Sergei Lavrov's attendance. North Macedonia is a member of NATO and has temporarily lifted a ban on flights arriving from Russia. The World Meteorological Organization says 2023 will be the hottest year on record, with global warming reaching 1.4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The report will increase the urgency world leaders face in fighting climate change as they meet in Dubai for COP28, the United Nations Climate Conference. For the first time, there'll be a global stocktake assessing progress on the goals set in the 2015 Paris Agreement to limit global warming. Also high on the agenda, fossil fuels, with the UN calling for a complete phasing out. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Adel Al-Marouki, watching events for us in Dubai. Adel, the summit has just opened, and I think we have some breaking news on an agreement. What have they signed up to?
Well, the participants here have raised about $260 million for the loss and damage fund. While that is not a remarkable figure, especially when you take a look at the division of the countries participating, you have $100 million from the UAE, 100 from Germany, $50 million from the UK and 10 from Japan. So just 4 countries have so far contributed, but still just reaching or crossing the $200 million requirement puts the loss and damage fund into operation, and then this means that the procedures for establishing the fund and finalizing the governments will start immediately. So that's the good news about this latest breaking news. However, if we're talking about figures, it's far beyond what is being needed. Recent reports show that for developing countries to, first of all, get financial support for the loss and damage affected, they need about from 300 to 600 billion US dollars. So the figures are way out of what being needed on the ground, but it is a step in the right direction, and that's why it has been celebrated here.
Adel, back with you in an hour. For the moment, thank you. Adel Al-Marouki, our correspondent in Dubai. The headlines again. Fighting paused in Gaza for a 7th day as international mediators negotiate the release of more hostages and Palestinian prisoners. Our other headlines, the World Meteorological Organization says 2023 will be the hottest year on record, piling the pressure on those leaders at the COP28 climate talks. And China mourns a pioneer and architect of Sino-US relations as Henry Kissinger dies at the age of 100, but he leaves behind a controversial legacy. And that is The World Today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's The Climate We Change. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.